Fast Fords. We've all got a favourite. Whether you want to go all misty-eyed at the thought of a Lotus Cortina with Jim Clark at the wheel, or go mad for the idea of Andy Rouse blasting his Sierra RS to the British saloon car title, the Blue Oval has produced something for everyone. But the beauty of Fast Fords wasn't just that they won almost everything available on track, but that you could then buy that car and drive it on normal roads. Perhaps even more important than creating a lineage of incredibly fast saloons is the fact that Ford then fed that speedy mindset into its smallest vehicles.
Even now, Fast Fords are very much top of the pile. This is our long-term Ford Fiesta ST, the Mark VIII, that we've been running for the past sort of 3 or so months. But if this is the Mark VIII, and this is the current Fiesta ST, where did it all begin? It all began with the XR2. Sure, there'd been many Fast Fords before that, but in terms of the Fiesta, this was ground zero for speedy specials. It came with some awesome pepper pot alloys, lowered suspension, snazzy graphics on the side that told everyone it was an XR2. And it had 84 horsepower, which, even in those days, wasn't amazing, but it was a start. And then came this, the Mark II. Now we're talking. Now we had near as damn it 100 horsepower. Now we had those awesome fog lamps on the front. Now it looked beefier and meatier and something to really take everything on. This was the 1980s. It was the era of excess. It was the era of moving yourself up the ladder. And this was the best way to get yourself onto that ladder. Now this weighs 839 kilograms. Which is the kind of weight that would make a modern Formula One car listen to it, blush and talk about needing to go on some kind of diet. And that means it'll do 0 to 60 in under 10 seconds in the 1980s. And it'll go on to do about 110 miles per hour. And the moment you get into it, you can see why people fell in love. Not only do you walk up to it and just see how awesome it looks from the outside, but you turn the key, you turn the engine on, and immediately that 1.6 litre 4-cylinder up front just barks into life. And it barks at you straight away, and then it continues to bark through the rev range. And yeah, this is an old car, so the brakes aren't quite as good as what you'd expect on a modern car. The steering is a bit heavy. There's no power steering, although once you're moving that doesn't matter in the slightest. It's got a cassette player, it's got a heated rear windscreen, it's got these awesome dials, it's got those fog lamps at the front, and all of that you could get for £8,340, which is the equivalent of about £20,000 today. And once you've heard that engine bark for the first time, the throttle response is just exceptional. You only have to twitch your toe and off you go. And it constantly is just there in the background, that sound just pushing you on and go, let's go, let's go. The suspension is a bit wobbly, but that's because it doesn't have the same modern technologies as today. And once you get through the initial surprise of moving into something that's 30 years old, it's something you can really push on with. There's no dead zone in the middle of steering in modern cars, so the first time you approach a corner in this and you start to turn and nothing happens, it's a little bit disconcerting, but as soon as you're used to that, you can chuck this into corners and it will stick. Not quite in the same way as, say, a modern car does, but in a way that's fun. And you can feel it move around underneath you, but you know everything that's going on, and it telegraphs that to you through this wonderful little steering wheel with the 2 little round finger holes that mimic those awesome fog lamps on the front. And you can just imagine being a teenager in the 1980s and just thinking about that first car and thinking about what you'd love to have. And it would be the XR2. It'd be this. And I'll tell you something, if I was a kid then, I'd be looking at one of these and going, that is just so cool. I have to have one. 17 years after that XR2 came this, the very first Fiesta ST. In the preceding years, the Fiesta had very much become the people's car, one of the biggest selling cars around. If you were buying a small car in Britain, it was a Fiesta. It still is a Fiesta today. There have been other fast Fiestas in those preceding 17 years, but none of them had ever lived up to that initial hype of the XR2. This was the car to change that. Ford reinvented the fast Fiesta as the ST. They shoved a great big 2-litre engine under the bonnet. We'd gone from 96 horsepower to 143. We'd gone from 8,900 pounds to 20,000. We'd gone from a 1.6 litre engine to a great big 2 litre. And we'd gone from 110 miles an hour to 129. Now it still retains some of the essence of that wonderful XR2. Throttle response is sharp and enjoyable, the steering is heavy but full of feel, and the gear stick throw is possibly even shorter than it was before. Now times had changed. Ford were still the kings of Britain though. The new GT was about to come out, and fast Fords were still the car that everybody really wanted. This was the age of nipping down to Halfords for a big body kit, of meeting up at 10 o'clock at night in a Tesco car park to rev your engine and your massive aftermarket exhaust. So it's incredibly rare to find one of these completely unmolested, as Ford have done here. And it doesn't feel quite so nimble anymore. It doesn't feel quite so ready to absolutely fly through corners, but you can feel that underneath it all, it's still a fast Ford. The Golf GTI was now in a completely different class, and the French come along with the Clio and really taken that mantle of the small hot hatch king. But in terms of history, this car may be more important than the Clios of the mid-2000s, because this car laid the platform for some of the great STs to come. It laid a platform for the next generation. The platform that the original ST had led to created this, the hardcore special edition ST200. This was a run-out version for the 7th generation Fiesta. But boy did they pour everything they'd learned over the years into this thing. Power's now 200 horsepower with overboost taking it even higher. Still through the front wheels. The 7th generation was the one that really took the Ford Fiesta ST into the position at the very top of the small hot hatch world. Gone with the Clios, gone with the 206s. The Fiesta was king. And this was its celebration. It was yours still for around £22,400. And for that, you received one of the best handling cars in the world, no question. And I will include basically every kind of car that you've ever driven in that. It's still got all those signatures. It's a 1.6 litre 4-cylinder engine, so we're back down to that original 1.6. The throttle response is instant. The steering is weighty and full of feel again. And the gearbox, now with 6 gears, still has that lovely short throw. Yes, the ST200 took everything that Ford had learned about making performance cars over the previous 25 years and threw it straight into a small car. And it is absolutely wonderful for it. But perhaps the most important thing that comes out of the ST200 is the Mk VIII Fiesta. Because while the Mk VII Fiesta ST is an extraordinary machine, this was the Mk VII Fiesta taken to another level. And then everything from this car, everything that they learned, is about to go into the Mk VIII. And it's going to be special. Now here in 2019, the Fiesta ST is very much top of the pile. This is the Mk VIII, and it takes everything that Ford learned from that wonderful ST200 and puts it into the standard car, and yet it still retains, yet again, everything that made the XR2 special. It's not a 1.6 anymore, it's actually a 1.5. It's not got 4 cylinders anymore, it's actually got 3. But it's still lightweight, it's still front wheel drive, and it is still absolutely made for driving. The steering is still weighty, it's still so communicative. The throttle response, despite the fact that the Fiesta is now turbocharged, is still exceptional. And if anything, with 3 cylinders now, the exhaust note sounds even better than it did before. The cracks and pops you get as you go through the gears are just naughty. This is the standard car. This isn't a special edition. This isn't a run-out model like the ST200 was. This is the standard car, and it still costs around £20,000. It's still the entry-level car for anyone who wants a performance car, and it will still absolutely match anything on the road, no matter what category. This is a little sports car, and it is by far and away one of the best cars you could buy today. We're now talking around 200 brake horsepower as standard. We're talking an interior which is now absolutely up to standard, up to the modern day. Sat-nav, we've got heated seats, we've got absolutely everything. We've got all the mod cons that anyone could want in this day and age. But we've moved on so far from that original ST that I just can't imagine anyone wanting to take one of these and fiddle with it. The base car is just so good. So even now, 30 years later, Ford are still providing that ultimate small performance car feel. The 2019 car looks great, it feels great, it sounds great, and it will still lap a Tesco car park better than anything else. And much like those XR2 decals on the side of the original car were a signpost that you'd made it, you could afford a performance Ford. Now the red ST badge is that sign.